On September 4th, 2025, the world was blessed with Hollow Knight's Silksong. After 7 long years of anticipation and memes, Team Cherry's second game released. Crashing storefronts across all platforms, everyone wanted a piece of this bug-infested pie, and its $20 price tag made it much more accessible than most modern releases. Peaking with over 400,000 concurrent players on Steam alone, it was safe to say that Team Cherry had done it again and had another certified classic on their hands. But something started to happen once gamers got their hands on Silksong. It was bombarded with negative reviews left and right. But for what purpose? I mean, the game ran fine, there was no microtransactions, and most languages were translated properly. So what gives?
The difficulty.
Gamers of all ages were saying that Silksong was too hard, with players complaining about enemies hitting too hard, the changes to movement, and runbacks from save points. How could this be? The long-awaited follow-up to the game with notorious difficulty had been too hard? Even Team Cherry had to address some of the complaints, marking another release alongside Elden Ring and Black Myth Wukong of modern games that are too hard, begging the question, is Silksong in modern gaming getting too hard, or are gamers getting worse? Well, I'm going to try to get to the bottom of that, but before we do that, we gotta go back in time. It's Yokoi here, and welcome to the pond, cause we're diving deep. Now, difficulty isn't a new thing in video games. I mean, hell, old arcade games were hard as balls just to get you to spend your money on getting the high score and, I don't know, what did they have back then? Donkey Kong? Pac-Man? But even at the infant stages, some games were extremely difficult. I mean, look at the original Resident Evil games, for example. The movement was clunky as hell thanks to tank controls, enemies could easily overwhelm you, and someone would get revived if you didn't use proper items. On top of that, bosses were stronger and faster than you, and combine that with the fact that your saves took up an inventory slot, you have the perfect recipe for a frustrating experience. Or look at Fallout, a barren wasteland, and the gameplay reflects that. You use the same button to interact and move, there's obscure quest design, the world's filled with planes of enemies who can just kill you. If it was released today, it'd be called slop immediately and turned into a critical video. Even the great pioneers of Quake and Doom were filled with hordes of enemies that could easily overwhelm players and kick your butt. Combine that with the limitations of 90s gaming technology, and you just got a mix of frustration and anger that would never get a sequel. Except it did. Not just one or two of these games, all of these games got turned into massive franchises that would forever change the gaming landscape. So what's going on? How are these games able to thrive despite how incredibly difficult they were? Well, I'd like to propose my 2 cents. See, during this era, the difficulty of most games was tied to the hardware itself, such as GoldenEye's notorious controls. And the lack of strength for most computers and consoles put an extreme limit on what could and couldn't be done. I mean, Doom's been damn near emulated on everything at this point. So things like limited saves and having loading screens between doors had to be done in order to make these games even playable in the first place. Now it seems even at the time players were divided on this, with many praising these games for their atmosphere and storytelling, with some not being able to look past the shortcomings. Clearly this isn't where the great upset happened. For that we gotta go further, all the way to the... We arrived in the 2010s, where the gaming industry hit a golden era. See, the beginning of the decade was filled with many great narrative and sandbox experiences. Red Dead Redemption, GTA 5, and The Witcher 3, all huge games with hundreds of hours of content within them. Moreover, stories that could rival modern cinema. The trend at the time was to show how powerful new consoles were with these epics, a trend which, to be fair, continues to this day. I mean, IGN was having a field day. You get a 10, you get a 10, you don't. Anyways, also importantly was the use of difficulty settings. Across all genres ranging from Terraria to Bioshock Infinite, it seems that most games contain some way for the player to choose the level of challenge they wanted. Now this isn't a new phenomenon. I mean, games from the 90s like Doom had difficulty settings, where if it got too hard, players could just go down a difficulty level and make it easier. Clearly this isn't where the great upset happened. Or is it? See, towards the end of the decade is when the difficulty renaissance occurred. I mean, you had so many classic games like Dark Souls, Cuphead, or even, Getting Over It. It seems like every game was trying to outdo the last one with how hard it was trying to be, and gamers were outraged. I mean, poor IGN, they couldn't even get past the tutorial. I mean, there is nobody to save you if you fall from the top of the mountain to the very bottom. And I just want to clarify quickly, I'm not talking about rage games where the intent is to design an extremely frustrating experience for the player. I'm talking about games that were released and then labeled as too hard, whatever that means. Most of these games have criticisms for having bosses that hit too hard or too much on screen or frustrating controls, which is crazy because those were the same issues we were having back in the 90s. Bosses are too hard in Dark Souls, same thing in Resident Evil. Getting over it's hard to control? Look at the N64! So the challenges haven't changed, but the response from gamers has? So what's going on? It's clearly not the technology. I mean, Red Dead 2's graphics look better than real life. We can achieve a steady 60 frames per second, and controllers are more customizable than ever. In a technological revolution, developers have nearly unlimited control of how to curate their games for player experience. See, I believe that's where the answer lies. In the 90s, developers were limited to technology and had to design challenges that were in accordance with what was possible. But today, developers have access to intentionality. They can choose exactly how many and how hard enemies hit you for. Clearly these games aren't that hard if they can be beaten in under a minute or hitless. Now developers can create challenges that simply weren't possible before. And I mean, clearly it's working out. These games have devout fan bases and have developed their own genres, like the Souls-like and Fadian genres are the direct results of these games. Also, it's not like those earlier games were any easier. I mean, you have people complain that The Last of Us was too hard. Or to today with Elden Ring, Black Myth Wukong, and even Silksong. No. Wait. Good news. My phone was recording and saved it. With Silksong, many complained that the enemies hit harder than the original Hollow Knight, or that the platforming sections were too hard. In a platforming game. There was such a large outcry, even Team Cherry had to address it. In an official statement, they said, "The base level enemy had to be more complicated, more intelligent. Silksong has some moments of steep difficulty, but part of allowing a higher level of freedom within the world means that you have choices all the time about where you're going and what you're doing." Similarly to Elden Ring, which everyone called too hard upon release, which is definitely not the case, and the game shows you that from the start. The developers purposely made the first major enemy encounters difficult in order to encourage players to explore the world and come back, even placing them near sites of interest with important upgrades to further reinforce this idea. Also, you can just use Rivers of Blood and I won't judge. The only situation where I really agree is with Concert Radon pre-nerf, and even then it seems like it was more of an issue with the hitboxes rather than the damage values themselves. All of which points to the player's interaction within the world. I mean, some people in Elden Ring don't use the Spirit Ashes, which actively makes the game harder, and within Black Myth Wukong, the game gives you free build resets, so you can just try different tactics on bosses. Difficulty is a slippery slope in gaming, and I'd definitely recommend watching Game Maker Toolkit's videos on why difficult games are important, because as technology gets better, the way in which developers design their challenges should as well. See, game creation is already hard enough as is, so when developers create enemies and game mechanics, they have to do so with a certain image in mind. And in my opinion, that just gets lost with difficulty settings. Now obviously there's nuance within this, but I feel like most of the time, difficulty settings don't really change the core experience that much. I mean, look at Wolfenstein, Call of Duty, and Cyberpunk 2077. In these cases, the difficulty doesn't come from what the developers had in mind, it comes from the fact that you die in 2 seconds. This type of difficulty is just lazy to me, as it doesn't require much thought besides you just waiting your chance more to hit the enemy. Also working in the opposite direction where the easier difficulties are complete snooze fest. I allow games with specific narrative difficulties because those are designed to let you quickly get through the gameplay and just experience the story itself. Not to fully discredit the system, however, because games do use it effectively, like Metro Exodus, Fallout New Vegas, Terraria, or Helldivers 2. They do interesting things, like adding mechanics like hunger and thirst, removing HUD elements, giving enemies new attack patterns, or simply locking them behind difficulty settings. These games use difficulty settings not just to make the game harder by making the enemy stronger, but they challenge the player through the use of the game's mechanics in directly changing them. So even difficulty settings, when done correctly, can be good, or even used as narrative framing. I mean, take a look at the original BioShock or Vampire. The player actively chooses to make the game harder or easier for themselves by interacting with the game's mechanics and affecting the story. I also want to quickly touch on accessibility settings, specifically in 2 games, Celeste and Doom the Dark Ages. Celeste, for those who don't know, is a platforming game that's pretty simple. You have only a few buttons. You have walk, jump, dash, climb, and that's it. Now obviously the game gets a lot harder as you go on, but from the very get-go they give you access to accessibility options, ranging from game speed to just infinite dashes. This is a great middle ground in my opinion because it allows the player to finely tune the experience for how much help they truly need. You can change the game speed if you still want the original challenge, but just needed some extra time, or you can just skip a frustrating section with invincibility.
Doom, on the other hand, goes balls to the wall crazy. You can change things like your game speed, damage values, tracking to your shield, and aim assist, allowing you to completely modify the game.
While this is great, don't get me wrong, it also makes it a nightmare for balancing difficulty. I mean, take a look at Moist Critical, who had to make the game harder on himself while he was already on the hardest difficulty.
How did that... What? Why is he so weak? It is a nightmare.
Now this is a natural trade-off for giving players so much choice, but I thought it was worth mentioning. And if it's gonna allow more people to play these games, I think it's worth it.
So who would have thought trusting developers was a good idea?
So is the issue gamers? No, not entirely. See, gamers aren't entirely to blame in this debate. I mean, you pay to play your games, and in the wise words of Reggie, if it's not fun, why bother? People are allowed to want streamlined experiences, not to mention people with disabilities who physically can't play these games because of the demand. Hard games actively stand against these types of players. And while it's clearly a small populace of people giving out the rage, in some cases like Consort Radon or the Savage Beastfly in Silksong, they might have a point where developers might just be getting a little carried away. Still, that doesn't mean you should review bomb a game the second you get angry with it. We should save that for malpractice and companies that do not care.
Ultimately, not every game's for everyone. A game I find easy, Elden Ring, might be the bane of someone else's existence, and vice versa. I mean, I find shooters pretty fucking hard, and there's 12-year-olds out here clipping people like it's nothing on Fortnite.
Ultimately, I think it just comes down to having an open mind and being willing to try things that make you uncomfortable. In a world full of instant gratification, having the ability to challenge that is important. So have gamers gotten worse? No. Have games gotten harder? Also no. All that's changed is the way that developers and gamers interact with the medium. It's your Koi. I'm out.